Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching a brand new edition of India's World with me, Frank Pereira. A variety of shared geopolitical interests have brought New Delhi and Washington closer together than ever before. Both countries have several common interests and are concerned about the rise of China in the Indo-Pacific. The change in geopolitical dynamics and estranged ties with America also seems to have brought China and Russia closer together. In the midst of its trade war with the US, China has been working to strengthen its ties with Russia in multiple spheres. Given extended US and European Union sanctions against its officials and organization for its annexation of Crimea from Ukraine, Russia also has reason to forge closer ties with China. But some experts believe the scale of cooperation remains limited. Other analysts believe if India has to be a global power, New Delhi needs to focus on a few countries like US, Japan, Israel, Germany and France. On this edition of India's World, we will analyze if there is a realignment in the world order. Joining me on the program today are Dilip Sinha, former ambassador, Shakti Sinha, foreign affairs expert, and KP Nair, strategic analyst. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of India's World. KP Nair, I'd like to begin the program with you. How would you look at everything that's happening at the geopolitical level? Are India and US coming closer together? Are Russia and China now coming closer together? And is there a change in order?
India and the US, the process that was started after our nuclear tests in 1998 has accelerated. Prime Minister Vajpayee signaled the closeness of relations with his memorable phrase, natural allies, describing India and the US as natural allies. President Trump's daughter has now recalibrated it in a tweet day before yesterday, in which she described India as a critical ally. But in my view, what is important is to lend substance, more substance, not that it lacks substance, but lend more substance to the relationship, I mean, it's okay to use phrases, natural allies, critical allies, that gives a that provides a feel-good effect. But what about adding new content? In my view, new content is being added only to the India-Russia relationship, contrary to the general perception that some people say Russia is a declining power, which I don't agree with. Other people say India-Russia relations are stagnant. You see, there are at the moment limits to what India can do with Europe, because Europe is caught up in its own problems. United States, as I said, with an erratic president like this, there are limits again. But with Russia, new opportunities are opening up. Unfortunately, what happens with Russia doesn't get much publicity in our media. A few days ago, President Putin's envoy plenipotentiary and deputy prime minister Yuri Tutnev, the envoy for the eastern region, was here. And our prime minister is going to Vladivostok in September, which is in the eastern region. So we are opening a new frontier in relations with Russia in the eastern region. And eastern region has unlimited potential, in minerals, oil. There is a possibility that we can merge our Act East policy with Russia's eastern region, including Russia's eastern region also in this. And if my memory serves right, no Indian Prime Minister has visited Vladivostok, So with Russia, new frontiers are opening up, and we need to pursue that,
Right.
I mean, there is no point in talking of Russia as if it is part of a old relationship, in my opinion, Russia, with its immense resources, is a new frontier which we need to explore. So while talking about new geopolitical relations, Europe and US and all that, we should not forget Russia.
Right.
And with Americans trying to isolate Russia and parts of Europe trying to keep a distance, part of Western Europe trying to keep a distance with Russia, this is a relationship that opens immense opportunities and we need to exploit it.
There are opportunities, there are new frontiers that need to be looked at as far as Russia is concerned, is what KP Nair is suggesting. But Dilip Sinha, I'm going to go back to the point that he was making about how it's a media reportage problem. People don't find Russia attractive enough. Do you look at it that way, or do you believe that there have been new avenues, new dimensions, some kind of new zeal that Washington and New Delhi have found?
Well, certainly India-US relations have been growing in strength ever since after the sanctions that were imposed in 1998, and relations started improving. And they are currently at a fairly good stage. America is our largest trading partner, and we have close collaboration even in defense, which is very unusual because it didn't take place earlier. But the fact remains that while the international order has changed, and some of it not to our advantage, the fact remains that today the world is far more multipolar than it ever was. So India will have to look at the world in that light, and also try and keep in mind that India itself is a major power, that instead of seeking to align itself with one or the other major power permanently, as we perhaps did in 1971 with the Soviet Union at that time, because the China-Pakistan axis had become very strong and there was a threat to our security. And at that time, we needed Soviet assistance and help. Today, that will not be the situation. We don't have that kind of a bipolar world. And while the China-Pakistan axis remains, and to a certain extent, Russia has joined that because of its closeness to China, and perhaps even the relations between Russia and Pakistan have improved considerably. But the fact remains that in this scenario, we don't have to look at it in a bipolar world. And our relations, both with Russia and perhaps even with China, although adversarial, there are opportunities with China as well. And that is something that other countries are also looking at. We must remember that countries like Japan and South Korea have recently held meetings with China on a free trade agreement. And there is also the negotiations going on RCEP, the Regional Economic Cooperation Agreement, in which China is a party as well as ASEAN and therefore other countries, and India is negotiating that. So the center of power has moved eastwards, and China is an important country in this. And we would be losing an opportunity if we completely cut ourselves with China and look at it as a completely adversarial relationship. Although from the security point of view, you have to keep in mind that China has certain threat potential for India. And to that extent, perhaps keeping good relations with America is extremely useful. I think that the China-US trade war has opened opportunities for us. It has enabled India to negotiate far more from a position of strength with China, and our exports to China have improved. I think China is much more mellowed towards India, thanks to that. It was because of that we had the Wuhan invitation. So in this world, we have to learn to play one country against the other until we ourselves become strong enough, both economically and militarily, to be able to become a pole in our own right, rather than joining any other group of countries for our own national security.
Sure, certainly. Shakti Sinha, I'd like to bring you into the picture now. Washington DC and New Delhi coming closer together. What is one of the biggest factors that has contributed to this? China's exploits in the Indo-Pacific. Could that be one of the biggest reasons?
Absolutely. The fact remains that we started coming close to each other, as both of them have mentioned, after 1990, after our atomic explosions at Pokhran. We realized that in the changing world, post-Cold War, both of us had a convergence of interests. See, countries come together not out of emotions. We are 50-year-old friends and all that. You come to each other, why? You share values and you share interests. You can't be purely about interests. We are not cynical. Values are important. And on both these factors, when Mr. Vajpayee at the Asia Society in New York said we are natural allies, he was signaling to them, yes, we've had differences in the past. Yes, today we are under sanctions. Please understand the changing world, we have to work with each other. Now, the rise of China. The Clinton administration actually thought the rise of China would be very benign. They were very keen on helping it. They thought it will evolve like quote unquote a normal country, democracy, rule of law, playing by the so-called international rules, etc. But the rise of China has happened in the first decade of the 21st century and subsequently has shown that China is testing the status quo at every point. It is pushing its envelope. Now, China is doing it in its own national interest. Let's be very clear. Others have also done it. But today, when you face that situation, you obviously want to have or be working with countries who had the same interest in you. Both of us want an open Indo-Pacific. We do not want wars, we do not want conflicts, but we are not shying away from differences. And I think in that sense, India and America are working together despite our differences. And Prime Minister Modi, when he met President Trump the other day in Japan, started by saying, we will talk about trade, we will talk about Iran, we will talk about 5G, and we will, our trade tensions, etc. So we are upfront with them, and as they are with us. President Trump's tweet is very obvious that the only way you can work with each other is by airing your points of view. And therefore, I would think that the changing world, the fact that China is emerging, and China remains a threat in that sense of the China-Pakistan very deep alliance, the nuclear alliance between them, the missile alliance with them, and the political alliance, stopping India's NSG membership, stopping naming of terrorists on the 1267 list, etc. So you realize that this situation is there. How best do you ensure that in this world you're working, you're comfortable, your interests are protected? And therefore, working with the United States makes a lot of sense for India.
Sure. Mr. Nair, does this make Moscow uncomfortable at some level? I mean, would they like things to change really as far as India and US or India and Russia itself is concerned?
I wouldn't take that point of view because Russia is still a great power. It's no longer a superpower, but it's a big power. People forget that the only country in the world which can physically destroy parts of the United States is Russia, I mean, if they fire a missile, it can hit Chicago in 30 minutes, unless it's intercepted, which may or may not happen. So, I mean, China can't do that. Nobody else can do that. So, Russia is still militarily a big power. It is a big oil and gas power. And let's not forget, it's a great civilization. And Russian diplomacy is in a class of its own. So, I do not believe that Russia's policy towards India or Pakistan is determined solely by our relationship with the United States or anybody else for that matter. A great power doesn't run its foreign policy as a zero-sum game, which means, for the benefit of viewers, the gain from one relationship is equal to the loss from another. Russia doesn't conduct its foreign policy like that. You see, Russia certainly would like the relationship to improve, the relationship with India. India would also, despite anything that the commentariat may say to the contrary, India would also like the relationship with Russia to improve. And it was clear from the transcripts that have come out of Prime Minister Modi's conversations with President Putin. But the problem is that given the nature of the two economies, given the nature of bilateral interaction, defense has come to define the relationship, you see. I have seen efforts by our people to diversify the relationship, you see. I mean, as far as I know, the previous ambassador, Pankaj Saran, he had more meetings with Suresh Prabhu as commerce minister in the effort to improve and diversify the commercial relationship. But it has not been successful, which is again, to come back, another reason why now we are looking at the Russian Far East to diversify the relationship. So if there is any shortcoming in the relationship, it is because of the circumstances, you know, it is because of the nature of the relationship. So it would be a grave mistake to think that because we have become closer to the United States, right, this is not like a jealous wife who is unhappy that the husband is friendly with a good looking neighbor, you see. So Russia doesn't conduct its policies like that. So but both sides need to ensure that the relationship gets diversified, and I believe it is certainly happening, because this envoy who came here last week, a week before last, he was here in 2017. So the process started in 2017. And let us not forget again that one of the 2 or 3 countries that are de facto contributing to the Make in India program is Russia.
Right.
Russia is manufacturing military trucks in Karnataka to be exported to third country markets in Asia. But I believe that it is a strong relationship, and it's likely to get stronger. I mean, Prime Minister Modi, for example, he has a special interest in Astrakhan province, where there are a large number of Gujaratis who went in the 15th and 16th century. Shakti will remember when Prime Minister Vajpayee went in 2001. Chief Minister Narendra Modi came to Moscow and he signed an agreement between Gujarat and Astrakhan, you know. So there are underlying elements to the relationship which do not attract enough publicity, but I believe the relationship is strong.
Okay, the relationship is strong. Further efforts need to be done to strengthen it further is what you're suggesting. But what about our relationship, Dilip Sinha, with countries like Japan, with countries like Israel, Germany, France? We've gotten really close to these countries as well over the last 5 years.
Well, our relations with these countries have been steady. With Japan in particular, we have had a very strong relationship, although there was a bit of a hitch when the nuclear test took place. Thereafter things went down, but we have picked up again. And there is the commonality of China's adversarial relationship, which is shared by India and Japan, and the need to keep the South China Sea corridor open for shipping, which is very important for Japan, important for India also. So if when India looks at the geopolitical situation in the eastern part of Asia, especially in the context of China, then Japan looms very large and very importantly. And also in the context of working together, let's say in Africa, the Japan-India combination works well because Japan has certain resources that India does not have, and the two together can work in Africa. So these factors are extremely important for India with Japan. With Japan and Germany, we are working together on the G4 for the permanent membership of the Security Council, which is also an important element. I think, let's say on the issue of Iran, we have commonalities with Japan and Germany because these are countries that want stability in the region. Germany for its relations with Iran because a lot of the market of German goods is Iran. Japan because it sources a lot of its oil from the Gulf region. So these are countries with which India should increase its diplomacy to put pressure upon America to ensure that this region does not blow up. That while the tensions with Iran need to subside, the threat of war in that region, which will affect India's interests very, very, very adversely, that needs to be done. And I think we should strengthen our diplomacy in that region. With Germany, in case our collaboration with Germany in high technology areas as a market for our goods is extremely important. Then, of course, there are other countries in the region like Vietnam, which are important for us in the context of our diplomacy and our relationship with China, because we need to strengthen our cooperation with these countries in the security field to ensure that in case of a confrontation with China, we have allies.
All right. And, as far as the RIC grouping is concerned, talking about Russia and China, Shakti Sinha, We are sandwiched in between Russia and China as far as RIC is concerned. Is that something that should concern us as far as the grouping is also concerned? Should we be wary, or do you think it poses tremendous opportunities for all three countries?
See, we are not looking for adversarial relationships anywhere. Prime Minister Modi in his speech at the Shangri-La dialogue last year made it very clear. When we talk Indo-Pacific, it's not directed against somebody. So to be very friendly with America, to develop close relationship with America, Israel, etc., as you mentioned, and to cooperate with Russia and China makes a lot of sense. See, Russia has been your largest provider for arms and ammunition for a very long time. Of course, we have now slightly diversified. It still is a major provider for it. China, because if you look at only trade in goods, not trade in goods and services, China is right at the top. Of course, our exports are very small compared to our imports, but the imports are also very important. And the fact that China is active in our neighborhood, which means that India and China must be talking to each other all the time. We do not want to step on each other's toes. We are very clear we don't step on your toes. But if you do step on our toes, we will object to it. And therefore, in that sense, to be sandwiched is not really, we are not really sandwiched. But yes, Russia and China have far more in common looking at the world in that sense than we have with either of them. One, Mr. Nair is right, Russia is, security-wise, it's a very strong power. But the Russian economy for the last 15, 20 years has been not doing well. The Russian population has been falling. Russian economy, if you take out oil, gas and minerals like zinc, etc., nickel, Russia is in a bad shape. So the kind of technologies that you want, or collaboration you want, Russia is not in a position to give. Russia, because of the trouble it has had, I'm not saying who's to blame for it, with USA and Western Europe, is therefore much closer to China. The interdependence on each other is important for each of them. So I don't think so we should equate ourselves, but we are not in a position of being sandwiched in that sense, because at the end of the day, Russia, China, India, especially China, India, have so much going for each other. And the way forward is only going to become, our relationship is going to become denser and denser economically. So even if politically and security you are at a slight disadvantage, I think the economic relationship, when you import $70 billion from a country, you're not a small player. That country also wants to be good to you in that sense.
Right.
So in that sense, I think it's important to work with Russia and China, but not feel that you'll get squeezed out by them.
Sure. All right. Closing comments now from all my guests, starting first with you, Mr. Nair. You know, as far as everything that's happening in the world is concerned, geopolitics is concerned, which way are we headed, you know, with the sanctions from the West on Russia, with, you know, the trade war between the US and China. So where are we headed?
Overall, my view is that our foreign policy is in good shape, and it's in good hands, especially with a professional diplomat becoming the external affairs minister. But what we should bear in mind is that every country looks after its interests. There is no room for sentiment. We used to be sentimental in our foreign policy in the old days. An example is Israel. We established full diplomatic relations with Israel, and then we moved closer in many ways to Israel. But there is a view in India that this needed to be done for ideological and, for want of a better word, ethnic reasons. But Israel gained, in my view, Israel gained much more from the relationship than we did. So citing Israel as a country that looks after its interests before anything else, we also need to look at our relationships that way. And there is enough scope for that, I think. You know, if we maintain our strategic autonomy, we have options. And given our geography, where we are placed, we have more options to do that than even the United States. Of course, the United States is a big power, but geographically, we have many options, and we should do that in the changing world order to protect our interests first and foremost.
Okay, all right. Dilip Sinha, tight balancing act really for India going forward, but what's the best way?
Well, you know, we spent a lot of our last 70 years pointing out to the flaws in the American international order and how we wanted the international order to change. Then we tried this alternative of BRICS and a multipolar world. Now with China emerging as a major power, we have to fear a China-based international order, where we may not have the same position that we had even in the earlier international order. So in all this, the fact remains that the world order is changing. How it will shape up, we don't know, but we certainly know that China is going to emerge as a major player in this, and the China-based international organizations will gain in strength, which may not be to our best advantage, although we have to continue to play with them and try and see whatever role we can play in that. But the important thing is that given our level of development today, technological and economy, we have to understand that our best course of action is to lie low, strengthen our economy, strengthen our technology, so that we can emerge as a major player ourselves, rather than seeking to join any other group as we have been doing in the past.
Sure. All right. And Shakti Sinha, close the show for us with your concluding remarks with the best way forward.
I think the best way forward is, and what has been happening for the last few years, we've got out of that mindset of getting worried about everybody else. For too long, we are worried about American domination, this, that. We have got out of that, thank God. We are a far more self-confident country. And we have realized that there is a very strong link between your domestic growth and your international policies, which is why earlier we only thought in power terms. We in Africa must work together, third world solidarity. It had displaced, it's over now. Today, you must bring economics and trade into the relationship. What is it that you and I can work together for? Is it good for my country? Is it good for our citizens? And I think, and therefore, strengthen relationship with the United States, with Germany, especially with France. France is sitting on a lot of the Indian Ocean. You want France to be active in this area because all of you share a commonality in terms of the worldview that you have, where you believe in rules, you believe in negotiations, you don't believe in unilateral action as far as possible, and you want negotiations to drive the way forward. So you share the worldview with them. At the same time, you're in a neighborhood where China is there. China is a very, very big country, slowly emerging as the world's biggest economy. You have to work, not just live with China, but actually work closely with China to see that the economic benefits of relationship with China accrue to your people. So in that sense, you are looking at a world, you're not looking at a unipolar world, you're not even looking at a bipolar world now. You're looking at a world where you have different economic nodes who are working with each other. And yes, Dilip Sinha is absolutely right. As Deng Xiaoping told the Chinese many years ago, don't take leadership. In that sense, he said, hide your capabilities, bide your time. We don't have to follow it completely. We are in a leadership position in many places, which is good for us. But we are not in a position where we can impose ourselves, which we should not.
Sure.
And therefore, working with your neighbors, working with these other big countries, I think that's the way forward.
Okay. All right, then. On that note, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of India's World. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. We'd like to hear from you as well. Do share your feedback and your suggestions with us. Our email ID is indiasworld.feedback@gmail.com. You can also tweet to us using our Twitter handles @FRP09 and @Rajya Sabha TV. That's it from me. See you again next time.